Welcome to Owl Have You Know, a podcast from Rice Business. This episode is part of our Flight Path series, where guests share their career journeys and stories of the Rice connections that got them where they are.
On today's episode of Owl Have You Know, we connect with Daniel Gutierrez, Professional MBA of 2014. Born and raised in Mexico, the finance professional shares his flight path and what brought him to the U.S., Rice University, and what landed him in his current role at North American Development Bank, a binational financial institution established by the governments of the U.S. and Mexico. We discuss the opportunities and collaborative initiatives between the two countries. Daniel also shares how being an international student at Rice shaped him into the leader that he is today. Today on I'll Have You Know, our guest is Daniel Gutierrez, Professional MBA from the class of 2014. Daniel, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So you were born and raised in Mexico and came to the United States in 2009 for a business opportunity and have decided to stay.
13 years and counting, almost.
So tell me about your childhood and your upbringing in Mexico and what brought you here to the United States.
Sure. Well, I'm a 1979 model in the kind of frontier of Generation X and Generation Y.
Yep.
And I kind of cannot identify with a particular generation. I think I have characteristics of both in terms of like personality. I grew up in the 80s. And during that time in Mexico, we learned that the oil bonanza was over. We thought it was going to be lasting for a long, long time, and it turns out that it wasn't the case. It was a time of decentralization, deregulation, privatization, reforms, the idea of a new federalism, and the kind of glimpse of the country walking into what appeared to be democracy, or the first kind of glimpses of that. It was an interesting time, I think. I remember, because we had high inflation. I remember in 82, 83, when I was like, 4 or 5 years old, my mother would take me to the groceries and people were like relabeling cans of tuna, for instance. And like, I didn't know what was going on, but it's inflation, 100% inflation in 82, I think, and so on. We didn't have double-digit inflation until like a decade after, I guess. So we grew up in the 80s, this generation, especially in Mexico, somehow, I think, valuing what we had, being content with what we had. It's interesting when I now see a Milky Way bar, for instance.
Yes.
It was a precious item back then because we didn't have anything like that when I was raised, right? So Mexico entered into the General Agreement of Tariffs and Trade. I think it was in 86. So the economy opened, and then NAFTA after that. That was my childhood growing up in the 80s, experiencing huge technological change. If you now think, these new generations think, okay, technological change with, what's happening out there with AI and stuff. We did live an incredible period of technological change back then. We didn't have internet, you had to actually walk to the TV to change the channel, things like that we sort of experienced when we were kids. You're probably contemporaneous to me, I guess. So you know what I'm talking about, going to the Blockbuster, renting a video, waiting for
Blockbuster,
returns.
Yes,
Yeah.
Those were the days, the good old days.
Exactly. So I'm a big fan of that type of culture, the pop culture. Keep watching those movies over and over again. I cannot get tired. It reminds me of my childhood. And in the 90s, I think it was more like NAFTA, economic opening, and then I decided, okay, I want to be an economist. It was early in my high school years when I decided I wanted to study economics. So I applied to ITAM, which is a great school in Mexico. Took me a while to figure it out. Flunked calculus 1 3 times, I guess.
But you didn't give up.
No, exactly. And that's all true. And that's part of this story, right? Because I think that the message that I'm trying to bring is why you want to, pursue an MBA, or why me, what makes me special. I think just keep on going, keep trying, keep staying at that effort, right? So that's what I did in my college years. Kept trying. That's one of my big mottos. That took me through college, that sense of I want to do this. And then after that, I graduated, I think it was in 2004.
So let's back up a little bit for the financial crisis, because we remember what the implications of that here in the United States. Can you tell me a little bit about what it was like in Mexico during that time?
Well, it was experienced in the financial sector mostly in the beginning. Lack of funding. When I was working in the municipal and state sector, I think the funding dried out completely. So many states and municipalities were struggling to fund their current expenditures to be able to afford the maintenance for the infrastructure. So it was a challenging time for many states and municipalities in Mexico and businesses alike. I think many businesses became bankrupt due to lack of funding, mostly the credit crunch all over the place. And at the time, I think the market certificate issuances was stalled for a long time. So even the ability to fund the long term, it was completely canceled out. I remember when I came to the U.S., you could see it everywhere, even worse than in Mexico. I think the mortgage industry was completely destabilized. But surprisingly, in Texas, you didn't have much of an effect, although there was. But I think the shale oil boom during that time sort of helped cushion the effect a little while. And especially, I think, in the city of San Antonio, there was a lot of empty, warehouses, houses that were abandoned, people asking for, help outside of the parking lots. It was kind of a shocking experience to me, just recently arriving to the U.S.
It wasn't what you expected.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely surprising, shocking. I got married in 2010 during that transition. So I came here with my wife into the state just after a year of being married.
Newlyweds, that must have been fun. Newlyweds in a new country.
Being just her and myself living, it was kind of a big reset. We didn't brought much of our belongings. We sold everything and just started from scratch after a year of being married. She definitely had been my supporter, starting from scratch. Recent newlyweds, it was a reset for us with great prospects. We wanted to start our family here and stay for as long as possible in Texas. We really like Texas. It's been our 13th year, I think, this 2023, and we look forward to just keep doing what we do. Now we have 2 kids, a 6-year-old girl and a 4-year-old boy. They were born here in Texas, so we now have a family of 4, and plus our dog that we brought from Mexico. She's an English bulldog. She's 14 years old, and she's still around. She looks like she's half her age.
So you're in the United States with your dog, your 2 beautiful children, and your wife.
Yes.
What made you decide to go to business school? So what was the reason, the catalyst of why you decided to go to business school? Was it the financial market crisis that you had just watched where you realized that you needed to make a change in your career? Or what really was the point when you decided, you know what, I'm going to apply to business school?
I think it is that, I thought some of my colleagues had experienced the MBA before. I looked up to them as professionals that are kind of more rounded, more assembled. Definitely, you could tell that the MBA provided a boost in their career in terms of not only technical knowledge, but also leadership abilities. I think that was something that caught my attention ever since I met people that have done the MBA studies. So definitely career advancement, improved business knowledge, global exposure, not necessarily the one that's probably in Mexico, but definitely I was looking for another option that provided me with the global exposure, with more diverse cohort, and personal growth in terms of, how can I develop the leadership skills that will take me a bit far from where I was. After that, we decided to come to the States, and the process sort of stalled. I began looking for business schools at the time. I think it was 2011, 2012. I did my research for my options that were available to me as a part-time program. So I was invited to the Diversity Weekend preview for Rice the same year. And it sort of blew my mind, even just discussing or meeting the prospective students. You could tell that there were high caliber students already, or people that were, success driven, business oriented. And we had this mock class. So I think it was Prashant Kale, the teacher that did the classroom experience to us, and it blew my mind. Prashant was one of my favorite teachers, not to single out anyone, but Prashant is amazing. And then that made me decide for Rice. Yes, it was farther, and I'll tell you how we did it. My wife and myself. It was a 3.5 hours drive from San Antonio. So I was accepted. I went through the program. I did the GMAT twice because I didn't got the score I needed to kind of consider myself with good chances of being accepted. So I retook it. I got the score I needed. It was a great feeling when I received the letter of acceptance, of course, and then figuring out how to finance it, because one thing was, okay, you receive the letter of acceptance, and then how you finance. We had some savings already built in, and it was kind of probably enough to pay a couple of semesters. And my wife, I remember, she told me, we'll figure this out. Don't worry. Wait, let's do this. That's how the adventure started. So she picked me up every Friday. I did the professionals program that happens on Friday and Saturday. I know now they have a hybrid and they have the online program, but I did the professionals program. My cohort had an average of 8 years of experience, more or less. It was highly intellectually stimulating to me. So she picked me up with our dog at my office, and we did the driving for 3.5 hours, dropped me at school, took our dog to the pet place where we left her, and then we basically booked a hotel for that night and Saturday night. That we did it for the 2 years. I think one thing that kept us going is this Dale Carnegie idea of living in day-tight compartments. In this case, was living in a couple of weeks tight compartments, maybe just going to school, focusing more than just what I was in front of me, and then going to the classroom, doing the homework, whatever was needed, and then, mucking 1 week at a time.
So that's quite a commitment that you gave to the school, driving back and forth every other weekend with your wife, and really funding this education that has been integral to what you do today. I mean, I think that if you're talking to other potential candidates who are thinking about Rice, especially from Mexico, what advice, other than just focus on getting in, because obviously that's important, but what sort of advice could you give them, that people that are in your shoes, back in 2010?
Let me go back to talk about what's happening in the Mexico-U.S. border region. Bilateral commerce has gone from $173 billion in 94 to $667 billion in 2021. That is a fourfold figure. Reshoring is happening, nearshoring is happening, near sourcing is happening. It's just a matter of time before, or it's already, the real estate prices in the border are already going up by 50%, and there's a scarcity of talent. Who is going to take the lead of those businesses that establish their offices, headquarters, manufacturing facilities in the border? Nearshoring can go as far as possible without the needed talent, without reliable, efficient, and cheap electricity. So I think to build the next generation of leaders in Mexico, I think they really have to think where they want to develop their MBA studies, or their studies of where they can learn leadership, all those skills that the MBA program grants, critical thinking abilities, all those skills that will be needed in the next years, in the next 20, 30 years. The border region between Mexico and the U.S. is going to become very dynamic. It's probably going to be one of the greatest times to be involved in an MBA program and to use those knowledge to make great things happening in Mexican businesses with foreign investment that are coming. Think about how the MBA is ranking right now. I was just looking at the Princeton Review recently released rankings. Rice is number 1 entrepreneurship for the 4th year in a row. Number 4 for the best online program. Number 5 for the best MBA for consulting. Some of my classmates are fantastic consultants, I believe, because of what we did during our experience. We were helping an ovarian cancer organization. We ended up winning the All Award due to my classmates' efforts as well.
It was called Overcome.
Overcome, exactly.
So can you tell me a bit about Overcome and what you did during your time at Rice? It was a different classmate that started that organization.
Yes,
correct?
Rusi, I think that's her name. We chose Overcome because the mother of one of my teammates had passed away recently due to ovarian cancer. So that was a a cause that we really cared about, and then we really needed to figure out a way for Overcome to launch and achieve additional funding, increase the share of mind among donors, and then we basically built a business plan for Overcome at the time. I think that element that we had in that Overcome, the skin in the game, we were highly invested due to the fact that one of us had the ovarian cancer very close in our families. So I think that sort of helped us push more and offer or all into the consulting process for Overcome. And I think the end product was great. We ended up winning the RISE Award, the OWL Award, because it was kind of an outstanding effort. I think that one thing that process taught me is how teamwork can make a difference. So the importance of teamwork definitely was something that I recognized from what was taught to me at RISE. And I still consider teamwork as one of the important elements in my daily working life. The classroom experience that RISE provided me, I remember U.S Mexico was saying, hey guys, focus on the slope, not the intercept. Don't worry for achieving the highest paying job. Look for an opportunity that offers you the big slope in terms of growth, in terms of opportunities. And that has been, I think, in my case at least, how I have grown professionally, by focusing more on an opportunity that allows me to do something that maybe nobody wants to do, the nitty-gritty stuff, the unknowns aspect of the business, and such as the asset management aspect of the business. Took over the asset management department when there was very little activity. We were basically concentrated in public loans, but then renewable energy project came into the pipeline, and then figuring out how to work that asset management side of the business was a fantastic opportunity for me. So we developed the asset management department at NetBank. I had the opportunity to lead the team as an interim director for a little while. And now I'm conducting other efforts as admin agent and other tasks that are related to asset management as well. But I think the idea of understanding that there are opportunities when you learn how to look, where to look, that's something that I learned from RISE. Focus on what's important. One of Miguel's teachings was constantly, focus on what's important, what the customer cares. And I think that's another important lesson for me during my MBA years. There was another lesson important from, I think it was Clayton Christensen, a book on how will you measure your life. The idea of being aware of the slippery slopes and how can a slippery slope take you through an outcome that you may not want. So be careful about those slippery slopes. Ethics matter. So always be mindful of the slippery slopes.
Well, those are wonderful lessons. And one of the things that I did want to discuss with you is your role as the Associate Director of Asset Management for North American Development Bank, which was a cooperation between the United States and Mexico. And you talked about teamwork. Right. And about, they say teamwork makes the dream work, right? That little cheesy line. But, it's challenging right now on the border between the United States and Mexico. And what do you think are the biggest misunderstandings in the region? What do you wish that people knew more about?
First of all, I think that binational coordination works, regardless of what you hear in the news. And NetBank is a testament for that. I think NetBank has shown that two countries can cooperate with the complexities that are between, water rights, water shared rights, immigration agenda. There's a bunch of other things that are not necessarily related to the funding of environmental projects. But the environmental impact and taking care of the environment is something that NetBank is doing as we speak. Understanding how the new challenges ahead with the nearshoring, reshoring, will bring the environment along the U.S. Mexico border in terms of water usage, in terms of pollution that is coming from the drainage in cities such as, Tijuana. There's security issues along the border as well. And there are so many different topics that are out there. But I've come to understand that the binational cooperation does exist. And maybe it's not there in the news for many reasons, but somehow it sort of works. And as an example, we just had a meeting with the three presidents of U.S., Canada, and Mexico a few weeks ago in Mexico City, and they were discussing what to do with this huge appetite for investments in the border region and in other parts of the country. You can see housing market for foreign citizens taking off in many areas of the country. So people are definitely considering Mexico as a retirement. And you think about all those baby boomers that are starting to, think about retiring, and then the new other generations that will retire in the next, 20, 30 years. I think Mexico is becoming an interesting place to invest in terms of like housing. There are beautiful places to consider as a second home, as a retirement home. And that is taking off in many areas. You can see the Nayarit Riviera, Yucatan Peninsula, Baja California, areas that in 10 years ago, you would never thought about, like people from the States establishing their homestead there. Well, now it's happening. And yes, there are news about, insecurity or, drug cartel activity, but those are very focalized. And when you hear about that in the news, it seems like it's all over the place. Well, there are very focalized areas where that is happening. And I think, yes, there are challenges. And in the next decade, there will be more. But the international cooperation between U.S. and Mexico will, is going to continue. That is my expectation.
And so what are some of your goals for the future in the next 5 to 10 years? What are you working on next that you're excited about that you want to share with us?
I'm really excited about the applications for artificial intelligence. I've been playing with ChatGPT in the past few weeks, and I'm, ecstatic of what you can do with that thing. Applications, AI applications of all sorts, and how that is going to integrate in our lives professionally and personally. Many people are questioning, hey, what is this going to happen? And, technological change has been there, forever. This is probably a new curve that we're going to live. I'm excited about all that kind of wave of artificial intelligence that's coming up. I'm reading every debate, copyright issues, schools that are worried that students will use that technology to present their essays, stuff like that. But the real discussion is, how are we going to train their next generation to use, how to leverage this technology for the betterment of human beings, for the betterment of humanity. It is a double-edged sword, perhaps, as maybe Elon Musk has alerted. But I think that singularity event they talk about when AI sort of becomes more conscious, it's just maybe going to happen eventually. And what are we going to do about it? All those discussions, I'm following them, and I marvel of the capacity in this very early stage of artificial intelligence. I'm also interested in expanding more globally in terms of what's out there in Asia, what's out there in Europe, in Africa. If you look at the population pyramids, the most promising ones are in Africa, or in China, not as much, but I think Africa, countries that are actually shaped as a pyramid, they're now less and less. And Africa offers a very promising place for foreign direct investment, for partnerships, investments like human capital investments, the evolution of solar, the evolution of wind energy, renewable, taking care of the environment. That's just here to stay. I think it's just a matter of time where we continue to see more investments in renewable energy in many areas. There's resource, of course, but now maybe coupled with energy storage. So you're going to see a lot of solar plus storage happening, perhaps more in California, perhaps in Texas, due to the need to get a more reliable network. And I think I'm very bullish in terms of the prospects for storage in the next 5 to 10 years, and maybe not only in the US, but also in other countries. I think Mexico is also recognizing the importance of renewable energy, despite the setbacks that we had in the past few years. I'm also very positive that in the next 2 to 5 years, we're going to see more projects becoming, at least starting. You see developers starting to look at the sector for the next 2 to 5 years. So I think we should also keep looking at the sector, regardless of the public policy situation right now in Mexico.
So lots of exciting things ahead.
Hopefully, yes.
Lots of things to look forward to. Well, Daniel,
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time today. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Likewise.
And we'd love to stay in touch. Next couple of years, we'll see where your path takes you.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you for your time today. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening. This has been I'll Have You Know, a production of Rice Business. You can find more information about our guests, hosts, and announcements on our website, business.rice.edu. Please subscribe and leave a rating wherever you find your favorite podcasts. We'd love to hear what you think. The hosts of I'll Have You Know are myself, Maya Pomeroy, and Scott Gale.